gotta get my friends over here.
Yeah, I love that you have your like spooky setup. That's really great. You've
Damn
got the
right I
whole
do.
vibe for sure.
I even have spooky light.
Yeah, I know. Your lighting's great. I feel inept right now. I'm just my lighting is
You said yesterday, let's try it on Zoom, and I moved my whole room around. I like kind of freaked out. And I was like, oh shit, I gotta get ready. I showered today for the first time in a week. That
Well,
kind of stuff.
your situation is definitely more curated than mine. I just have my many precious volumes behind me, so I'm a
As do
learning
I.
person,
As
but
do
Look out, something is going to get you tonight. Let's talk about the thing that's going to get you tonight. Welcome to the Happy Harvest Horror Show.
welcome to the podcast. I'm Corrie.
And I'm Brian, and this is the Happy Harvest Horror Show, where every week we talk about spooky things and spooky life events and spooky people and spooky... I always run out of steam. It's all things spooky. And we're here on, if you're not watching us on video and listening along, we're now on video. And you can check us out on YouTube too, because we got spooky faces.
Yeah, we have faces. So if you want to look at our faces while you listen to our voices, we're jumping
like a normal person,
We're jumping on that Zoom life, and you can watch us talk about these spooky topics on YouTube. Follow us, Happy Harvest Horror Show on YouTube. We'll probably, I don't know, maybe do some other stuff on there eventually too. Like, who knows?
Maybe.
The possibilities are endless.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah.
We're just babies at this, Spooky little babies.
Brian.
But yeah.
How spooky was your week?
It was delightfully spooky. I got a lot.
Good.
I covered some ground this last week. There was if you see the title of the episode, we're talking about our girl Mary Shelley. We go way back. So I watched two different movies about her, and I went back and watched Vincent Price's The House on Haunted Hill from like 1959. What a banger of a movie.
It's so good.
It's so good. I've been recently going back and watching a lot of Vincent Price's movies, specifically the Poe movies, which really have nothing to do about the Poe stories, but they're just like horror movies and they'd we'll tag the title to Raven on there. That they're so dark, they're so scary, especially this one. It's in black and white, and there's some legitimate jump scares in this from 1959 black and white aspect ratio, and I'm like jumping out of my skin. Like, that's the scariest image I've seen. And they're just like walking skeletons too, and there's like bats of acid and bleeding ceilings, and oh my god, 10 out of 10. So it's on Amazon Prime. Check this out. Vincent Price, what a guy. We should do an episode on Vincent Price because
Definitely. Yeah.
What a legend.
That version I saw a couple of years ago for the first time, and I was like, this is so good. I've seen the remake several times.
The 99 one?
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Jeffrey Rush. Yeah.
Which is also a fun movie, but yeah, the original is really a bit of a masterpiece. I agree.
It is. Oh my gosh, I'm slapping myself that it took me so long to see it. I've seen a lot of other movies of Vincent Price, but that one I was like just really underestimated. It might be my favorite of his now. It's so good. What else? I got my waxwork record sitting right over there of Haunting of Bly Manor. So I've been listening to that, and just as I do other stuff, man, so good. So good. The music is so good.
Even being like spooky when you're like during the workday, like
it's a lifestyle, dude. You have to at all times. And I usually have to close the door because the things that I have going on are just horror soundtracks, So as I'm like casually going throughout my day, I've got like just tones going, and like sharp strings, and often Walls is like, "Can you close the door?"
Can we not do that at 1 in the afternoon?
Yes, it's a Tuesday at 1, and the sun is shining. Act like it, But
oh, that's great.
but yeah, I watched that. I watched a Shudder movie, if you can believe it, called 12-Hour Shift, which was just fucking wild. It was like it's about this nurse that's working a 12-hour overnight shift at this hospital, but she's also she's addicted, and to make money she sells kidneys to the black market on the side of getting, and that's just the start. And then it's like the movie nonstop. It gets crazier and crazier. Murders start coming into it. A serial killer checks in, and the serial killer is David Arquette. So like wild
fun.
movie. I had a lot of fun with it. It was an amazing, but I watched it one night. I couldn't fall asleep. Put it on. It was perfect for what I needed. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. How about you? How spooky has your week been?
My big one has been a pretty popular show right now this week. I guess it once again is in the true crime realm, but I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched Cecil too.
Yeah. So it's Crime Scene Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. That's what it's called. And I actually really don't like the title of it at all.
It's awful. Is it Crime Scene like a series, or is that just the title they came up with?
Yeah, that's just the title that they chose. I really don't like the title, but I also I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Because like I don't like the title, but part of me thinks they used that title as a way to be like, to make it seem like a very typical true crime story show, to kind of bring people in to a much broader story. Because what I love about this series, and I think is brilliant about it, is it's not really just a true crime show. In fact, I think that's very low on the list of what it's actually about. I think it's about so much more. I mean, it's about conspiracy theories. It's about internet sleuthing. It's about mental health awareness. Yep. It's about the complicated history of a particular space. And I think that is something that's just like fascinating, the way they really tell this historical story of a space is like so well done. The historian that they interview throughout the I can't think of her name, but she's an LA historian, like that's her specification. She's incredible. Like I love the way she tells stories, and like she just knows her information, and the way she kind of creates just a life for this space being the Cecil Hotel, and also that area of LA, which is Skid Row, which is infamously known for like homeless population. So the show's also about like dehumanization of homeless populations, and it's about so much. And then it's ultimately about like human connection and regeneration, and like it's so good. I was so happy with the resolution of it. Like episode 4, I was just like, this is great. Like this just took me to so many places, and like I think really, hit on a bunch of things that you wouldn't expect. I also know it's been like it's gotten kind of like mixed reviews, and like I don't know, I read this one review that honestly just like really frustrated me, because like the guy was like super mad about it, and he was like, this could have been just like a really like clean, neat, like true crime story. And I was like, why? That would have been so boring.
Well, then you go back to the title. The title is telling you that's what it is. And then it becomes like 10 different other things, which I do concede that it does, it goes at a lot of different places, and that it introduces one core story, and then it will, which to its credit, I feel like get the bigger picture of what's happening with this story, with all this other context. But I did think there was a few times where I'm like, man, we are dragging this to 4 episodes that, I feel like could have been 2 episodes. But I don't know if that would have been better, because I did appreciate all the different places it went. So
yeah, I think, well, I guess my argument to that would be, one, there's so much content on this case out there. There's so much out there. If you want just like a quick rundown of like the the crime of the story,
spooky crime,
you can find it like that. I think that exists. I think that exists all over YouTube. So I think that already is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also will admit I'm the type of person that this show was made for, right? Like I'm an investigator by nature. I'm very into research. I'm very into breadth. I'm very into looking at the bigger picture and the bigger ideas. Mm-hmm. And so if you're someone like that, then this is, I think, a really good series for you because it totally does that. Like it's totally about breadth. It's totally about telling, at the nexus of it all, yes, it's one woman's tragic disappearance, but it's trying to tell all of these bigger stories to create a much bigger picture. And I think if you're really into, if you're someone that's just like always kind of like asking questions and you're like, I want to go deeper into this and deeper into this and deeper into this series does that, like it's not telling a straightforward cut and dry story. It's like, we're going to go down this road a little bit, and then we're going to go down this road and down this road. And personally, I think episode 4 was really well done because I do think they did a pretty good job of tying it all together in one kind of like big culminating idea concept. Did you have any history of the footage before this? Have you seen that elevator before the show, that elevator footage? Yep.
I remember seeing that in college. Was it college? Maybe after college. Anyway, it spooked the hell out of me. God.
Yeah. Damn. Well, I went back. I actually because so it happened. It happened in 2013, February of 2013. And part of it too, and this just speaks to my little like Tumblr girl heart, because I, as you know, was like obsessed with Tumblr. Mm-hmm. And like I spent a lot of time on Tumblr in like early 2010s. And so like that's like another thread throughout the story is like this woman's Tumblr and her Tumblr presence and stuff. And so I like went back and was like looking at my Tumblr, like when this was happening, like realizing you were actually a part of this environment, that's like, like that's kind of an interesting thing. And also I've tried to go look at her Tumblr and it's still up, but I can't get it to load because I think so many people are on it right now. Yeah.
That's wild. Which ultimately is really sad. I remember watching that footage and having like, is this possession? Is this what is happening?
Yeah.
Is this the devil? Is this fucking
you weren't alone, man. A lot of people thought that
because it was fucking scary, dude. Just without any of that context, you just see that and the bare bones stories. There's this spooky elevator footage, and the next time she was found, she was in a water tank, drowned on the roof, and it was like, how do I in my brain connect A to B and for not to be something wild? Like I can't. And then the story, to its credit, it really does break down like this is pretty sad. All the sensationalizing about it actually ruined some people's lives. And it didn't really honor her, at all. Exactly. So I appreciated that's the stance it took by the end, but
I totally agree. Because in the end, I think it brings it back to that, right? It brings it back to her being a full human who had a unfortunate, tragic death, and it strips away all of these spooky stories we want to tell, to make sense of it. And it's like there's something very real and very honest and very like human about doing that in the context of, and so that's why part of me thinks the title is intentional. It's like trying to create this sensationalized true crime thing, and then it's like gotcha. Like,
tired of all these gotchas in these fucking documentaries though. Do you remember, did you see I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't, but did you watch Don't Fuck with Cats, the documentary?
I refuse to. I won't.
Well, I don't have to get into, but at the end, the last thing they were like, and this was all done because people were watching it online. So you know what? Gotcha. You're the real killer. And I'm like, no, I'm fucking not. Like,
I've had conversations about it though, and and this is fully from those conversations. I have not watched it, but what I took from those conversations though that I do like is that it sounds to me with Don't Fuck with Cats, they are pulling kind of we need to take responsibility for the things we consume to some extent, which I think is a valuable lesson. Like the internet's a wild place, and like I'm really big on like kind of taking responsibility for like curating like your social media algorithms and stuff. Like I think social media can actually be a really wonderful place if you are using it consciously, like very consciously, and you are like training your algorithms to like feed you good content that's going to like give you information, is going to benefit you, is going to, but it's super dangerous as well for people who don't have those skills. That's why we end up with all the shit on like Facebook and like QAnon.
You
and
just
like
create your own bubble and you're only getting information from that incorrect
and
bubble.
So just going back to the Don't Fuck with Cats thing, I think that there is something there about like just always clicking on the hyper sensationalized thing is it's dangerous. Like that's an action that you're taking, and like we do need to take some sort of responsibility for it. So like I'm not saying I'm not saying you are the killer. I'm just
saying. The documentary did, and I was like
excuse you.
Fucking I'm gonna put my hand on your chest and actually just step back as no, I didn't. I just got here. I just learned this.
But I would like to do an episode on the Cecil Hotel sometime, because there is so much spooky about that place. Like
there's a whole American Horror Story season about it.
It's wild. It's wild.
And spooky.
Yep.
Spooky time. Well, that's a pretty spooky week.
Yeah.
Kudos. Good job.
We did it. All right. So today's episode, I'm excited.
It's going to be a good one. But before we get into it, I think we should thank our best friends.
We should.
I'm going to pull them up because this is actually a great problem. We have so many wonderful members of our coven that I want to thank them all. We got Julia, Jody, Erica, Wendy, Jennifer, Jody, Aaron, and Morgan. Thank you all so very much. You guys are the true heroes. True heroes. And we really appreciate it. And if you would like to join and support us so we can keep doing new things like, going on YouTube and keep churning this out every week, you can go to anchor.fm/HHHS/support. And help us out. Or another great way to help us out is to leave us a review on iTunes. Head to Instagram and tell everybody you know.
Everyone.
Leave no one out. No stone unturned. They gotta know. And yeah
you could also just write really like cryptic ransom letters and tape them on your neighbor's door.
Yeah,
but
like not too cryptic. You don't want to scare them that much. Spook them a little bit, but not like
spook them a little. But yeah, that would be, I think, really great promo for us.
Yeah, there's no such thing as bad publicity. I've heard.
I've heard that.
But it sounds like you can get bad publicity.
How about somebody try it and we'll find out.
And it'll be on you, because just like Don't Fuck with Cats, we're not taking any responsibility for it.
I'm the real murderer.
Exactly. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Today we are talking about the original goth teen queen. The creator of like the science fiction genre. And just all around spooky human Mary Shelley.
Or born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin.
Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin.
Beautiful, yes.
What a name.
So, Mary Shelley, born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, was born August 30th, 1797 in Somerstown, London. Her parents were both radical writers and political reformers, Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin.
Mary Wollstonecraft wrote The Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792. She sounded like a pretty dope lady, but sadly, Mary didn't know her because she died shortly after she was born. I think like 10 days after she was born.
11 days.
11 days. 11 days. That's really sad.
Due to an infection that was actually the fault of the doctor that delivered Mary. Is a very common thing back in the day, like doctors sticking dirty hands where they shouldn't be and causing infections. Very sad, very tragic.
It's really sad because she sounded like pretty fucking cool. And her father, Mr. William Godwin, didn't want the children to be without a mother, so quickly remarried to a Miss. What is her name? Mary Jane Claremont. That's it. I actually have I went back into my own copy of Frankenstein here. It's just the Penguin's classic, but it's like, this is surprisingly invaluable. It starts with a biography of her. It's got a foreword from Percy Shelley. It's got at the end, it's got which we'll get into later, the other two spooky stories that were conceived along with. Perfect book. Anyway, they say in this, for the father, what was it? He felt an urgent concern about providing life proposals and solutions in the abstract, but shrank from getting too involved in the tiring and emotionally challenging occupations of child rearing at close quarters. Like, so he could think a lot, but he couldn't be bothered to think about raising his children. So he remarried real quick in 1801, and Claremont brought her own 2 children into the union. Mary had a stepsister, Jane, later Claire, who went away to school but saw no need to educate Shelley herself. This is a classic evil stepmother story, almost, you know?
Yeah, a little bit. They definitely, Mary and Mary Jane didn't really get each other. They didn't really understand each other. Mary was kind of this like spunky goth child, and Mary Jane was a little bit more traditional. It's said that she kind of favored her own kids over Mary as well. So it was just kind of it definitely had the like evil stepmother vibe a little bit. Just didn't really click, didn't really understand each other.
She didn't get it.
It's also worth mentioning that her parents, that Mary Shelley's parents, Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin, as they were both like radicals, they didn't have traditional views on marriage. They were actually both very like outspoken about pretty much like free love ideology.
Hell yeah.
And they only ended up getting married when Mary Wollstonecraft got pregnant. And so it kind of turned into this, like, they wanted to, quote, legitimize young Mary because they didn't. So it basically they were at odds with their own ideology when they got married.
As she was growing up, she didn't have really a formal education, but she did grow up in the household of her father, who is a prolific writer. And as such, there was a number of distinguished guests that would just show up, like Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth, if you know any literature history, they're big names. And it was also had a full library of all her father's books that she would read. And I saw this tidbit that was super goth, super spooky, super hot topic. She could often be found reading by her mother's grave. Like, what? That is angst teen.
Oh, yeah. She spent a lot of time at her mother's grave as a child. And she liked to go to sit by it and read and write. And in addition to that, I love this. She learned how to write her name by tracing the letters on her mother's gravestone.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. That's wild.
I know. Like, there's so many little tales in her story, just like little nuggets that you're just like, yeah, I mean, I will never be as goth as Mary Shelley. Like, it's just like, it's like an impossible feat to like.
Yeah. It's pretty metal, dude.
Yeah.
She also, her favorite pastime as a child was scribbling. She could be writing for hours. Her father, during the summer of 1812, thought that Shelley, Mary Shelley, should be maybe happier up in Scotland with an acquaintance of her father, William Baxter. She stayed with that family for a while, and she loved Scotland very much, so much she returned the following year. And it's important because at this time, there was a disciple that came along to her father's house and loved his writing. His name was Percy Bysshe Shelley. And when she came back, they met, formed this wonderful relationship. She was 16, he was 21. They fell in love, just a small little hitch. He was already married and had a kid already. So it was frowned upon, this relationship, big time.
It was complicated though, because this seems to be a theme that like weaves throughout her entire story. Because, well, one, like Percy Shelley is a complicated figure. Like most of the time you don't know whether to love him or hate him. You know, it's like this constant back and forth, because he did do a lot of really cool things, and he was very politically radical and like very progressive for the time, like very progressive. And he cared about women's rights a lot. But also, much like Mary Shelley's parents, he was also into like free love ideology, like non-traditional, non-monogamy type situations. Mary Shelley was on board with that. Like she was like, yeah, that's cool. Like I dig that. So there was elements of just polyamory, basically, like at a time when that was just not chill, like not okay. That being said, by all accounts, his wife and kid, I don't think were on board with this lifestyle that Percy wanted to be living.
Does not sound like it. And it does not sound like, even though her father, that was their way of life before Mary was born, Mary engaging in this relationship with Percy was not okay with him. In fact, it kind of alienated her from the family once Percy and Mary decided to elope. Not elope, they didn't get married, but they ran away with each other and brought their sister Claire along.
Yeah. And that's also, I mean, that's an interesting thing to think about, like conflicting ideologies and like believing one thing when it's you and your own life, and then all of a sudden not believing it
when it's someone else.
Yeah, when it's your child, when it's your daughter who wants to do it, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute.
Hold on.
So there's some interesting conflict, and I mean, I think just inner turmoil with that ideology, especially once again, we're talking early 1800s. This is very frowned upon socially. It is not just like a chill thing really anywhere. It's very frowned upon. Like you're a pretty radical person to engage in these kinds of relationships openly. Right. And Mary Shelley was radical. Like she was into that for sure. On June 18th, 1814, soon after meeting, Mary declared her love for Percy once again at her mother's grave. So metal. And it gets so good. The most like weird, spooky, goth romance shit possible. It is believed by many scholars, based on Mary Shelley's journals, that she lost her virginity to Percy on her mother's grave.
Jesus. Damn. Mary. Mary, come on.
I know. I was just like, holy shit. That's amazing. That's incredible. So very soon after Mary loses her virginity to Percy on her mother's grave, they pack up all their things and disappear in the middle of the night. Also very, spooky and sexy, run away together story. They hop on a boat and they head off to France. Interestingly, Mary brings her stepsister, Claire, with.
Why not? Claire's dope.
Yeah, it is also thought that she had like a thing for Percy as well. And there is some speculation of kind of a love triangle situation going on here. Maybe. So they get to France and they're actually walking through France. They decide to just like hoof it through France. And they're writing about their travels and observations. And they're headed for Switzerland. That's the goal. When Mary becomes ill, they believe she was likely pregnant at the time. And they also run out of money because Percy's dad cuts him off. So
because he's a scandalous son.
Mm-hmm.
You tarnish the name.
He's gallivanting through France. He cuts him off, and so they run out of money and they head back to England. As we mentioned, Mary's father, despite being a radical, has pretty much disowned Mary at this point. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He is very disapproving, which is complicated and conflicting in certain ways. So the two of them move in with Claire back in England. And as I mentioned, the free love gets kind of complicated as Percy's going on long walks with Claire while Mary is super pregnant. And who knows? Long walks. I don't know.
Who are we to speculate about 18th, century gossip? But here we go.
But we're doing it. and it is complicated because they were in like an open situation to some degree. So like we can't make judgment calls on like what was actually going on, but it seemed like it was complicated for Mary. And I love this. She wrote a letter to her father to inform him that she was pregnant. And she phrased it, and I quote, "I'm nurturing a creature."
So metal.
It's so like
fucking so
it's
metal.
so spooky. It's so monstrous. It's so Mary Shelley. It's so good. Also, if I am ever with child, I am totally using that line. Like that's gonna be like
nurturing a creature.
That's gonna be my like my announcements. People do like baby announcements.
Nurturing a creature.
I'm totally going to quote Mary Shelley. Oh, that'll be so good. So she's nurturing her creature, and a tragedy strikes that really affects her. So her daughter comes 2 months premature. She gives birth 2 months premature, which, I mean, that's a hard thing to do even by today's standards. But back then, a baby surviving that is very unlikely. But the child did survive 12 days, which was also kind of this heavy thing because I think it probably gave Mary a lot of hope,
Yeah.
And then the baby passes away and Mary ends up very just in a bad way, just very plagued with these like really haunting nightmares after losing the baby. There's also this tale of Mary like sitting by the fire with the baby, hoping that the fire will bring her back to life.
Sad. It's really sad.
It is. Yeah. And I think there's also an interesting connection there between like, reanimation, like bringing something back to life, and what we know Mary Shelley would go on to create. But she's struggling with all of that, struggling with really extreme grief. And she also becomes pregnant again a few weeks later. And January 24th, 1816, she gives birth to her son, William, a healthy baby boy. Ultimately, Mary just has a very difficult and tragic story as a mother, because I know William did live for several years, but eventually he dies as well. Basically, throughout the course of her life with Percy, she had 5 pregnancies. She had 4 children, 4 births, and only one of the children survives into adulthood.
Percy Florence Shelley. The rest of them all passed tragically at a young age. So a very heavy motherhood that Mary Shelley experienced. I would say so.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
I'm not reaching there when I say that.
In 1816, Percy's wife, Harriet, commits suicide. She is found drowned in Hyde Park. Mary and Percy end up marrying each other, like legitimately getting married, despite their radical, their radical love. They marry in an attempt to win custody of Percy's kids, but Percy is deemed morally unfit to care for them. So that doesn't work out.
Damn.
Yeah. Ultimately, the tale of Mary and Percy's spooky romance culminates at the young age of 29 for Percy Shelley. Percy died in a shipwreck in July of 1822, which, like, name a more romantic death, like Jesus Christ.
he drowned while sailing with a friend in the Gulf of Spezzia. That
is a romantic poem if I have ever.
That's the last line of a novel somewhere, that like
totally, like, I'm picturing these like sublime landscapes and like, oh my God, like, yeah, I mean, super tragic, but
what a beautiful death, dude. Well done.
Right? It just fits. It fits the story. It truly does. And this is one of my favorite stories about their spooky romance. A year after Mary's death in 1851, family members opened up her desk and found locks of her dead children's hair, a notebook she shared with Percy, and a copy of one of his poems, along with a silken shroud containing some of his ashes and the remains of his heart.
Damn.
His like calcified heart. Like, that's
metal as fuck, dude. God.
So, I mean, yeah, if you want a like spooky goth romance, like, look no further, my dudes. Like, Jesus.
This wasn't a long romance. This was the craziest part of, like, there's this long, all this biography of their romance, this whole story. And then I got to this part where it said, made a widow at age 24. And I'm like, 24? Dude, this is like, you lived 5 lifetimes before you were 25, You came up with Frankenstein. You went through, this whole tumultuous relationship with this romantic poet, like, Jesus, 5 almost kids, Damn. Before you're 24. My God.
I like how you're like
fucking
mad about
chill, dude.
Truly. What was I doing at 24? I don't even know. But it wasn't that intense, that's for sure.
No.
Oh man. No, truly. Yeah. And so much in such a short period of time and such a young life. Like, oh wow.
And after he did die, she did devote herself to promoting her husband's poetry throughout the years, preserving his place in kind of literature history. I got this guy from biography.com. And it was kind of hard because, as we found out, earlier, that Percy's father disowned him because he did not approve of the bohemian lifestyle. He faced some opposition from him in trying to promote the name, which is like also kind of wild that you're fighting with your dead husband's father to be like, your son was good, and he's like, no,
I say no.
No, it's wild. But sadly, yeah, I mean, skipping forward a bit, she did die in 1851, like you said, of brain cancer.
That's what they assume it to be. It's kind of one of those things that it was so long ago, but yeah, her physician suspected it was a brain tumor.
And she was laid to rest with the cremated remains of her late husband's heart. Boom. In St. Peter's Church. Fucking wild.
Yeah. So good. I mean, already, like, her romance, her life, like, you've just got layers of spooky on layers of spooky.
Layers, dude. Layers.
And we haven't even gotten to, like, what makes
Frankenstein.
Yeah. Like, we haven't even gotten to, like, the big reason why she's considered queen of horror, queen of sci-fi, So this is also just a wild, crazy story.
The story of how this came about is I struggle to believe it.
I know.
No,
Like, how is this real?
So
before we get into it,
yeah.
there is. Have you watched the Drunk History episode on this?
No, but isn't it with Aubrey Plaza? Is that right? Or who does it?
No, but it is one of my favorite Drunk History episodes. It's so good.
On this weekend? Were they like?
Yeah. It's actually, so the name of the episode, it's in season 6 of Drunk History, and it's called "Are You Afraid of the Drunk?" Because they do it as like an homage to "Are You Afraid of the Dark?"
Midnight Society.
Yeah, they like
Awesome.
they're sitting around a fire. It's like that whole vibe. And then the entire episode is dedicated just to this story. And it's the story of the night Frankenstein came to be, and it is one of the funniest episodes. It's so good. And Evan Rachel Wood plays Mary Shelley.
Yeah.
And
dope.
Yeah, she does a fantastic job. It's what's his name? Frodo. Elijah Wood plays Percy Shelley.
Of course he does. Elijah Wood's got a great history. He does a lot of horror now. He's a huge name in horror, which is wonderful.
Love it. But yeah, I very much recommend it. Any Drunk History fans out there, you have to watch this episode. I've seen it so many times. It's absurd. But yeah, let's do it. Let's get into just this absolutely nuts, spooky, drug-laden sex fest at Lord Byron's.
just a chill weekend at Lord Byron in 18. We first have to know Lord Byron is another huge romantic poet, very bohemian to say the least. This dude.
That's a way to put it.
Yeah, that's the nicest way I can put it. He's a bohemian boy, but he one of those bohemian boys. He began a courtship with Claire. Remember Claire, stepsister, which led to them. I mean Claire. Mary, Percy, Lord Byron, and Lord Byron's physician friend, John Polidori.
I feel like courtship is also a very nice way to put the relationship that Lord Byron had with
a
Claire.
Summer fling, if you will.
Perhaps.
Flavor of the week for Lord Byron. Maybe it was. But,
yeah, probably.
But anyway, the 5 of them meet at Lord Byron's for a weekend, or in the summer, not for a weekend, it was for a few weeks. Everyone stayed with each other for months, it feels like, in the past. You hear these stories.
Yeah.
Like, I just went and lived with you for a few years.
And they did. Stories. They were there for a while. I know that.
Yeah.
I don't know how long exactly, but like they were hanging out for a minute.
For a while. And at this time, there was a spell of a few weeks where it was super rainy. And so they were cooped up in the house all day.
Do you know why that is? Do you know
why it was all rainy?
Mm-hmm.
The weather? I don't know.
That was actually
story behind the weather too.
Yeah, there is a story behind the weather.
Damn.
Actually, that was the summer without a sun. In 1815, a volcano in Indonesia erupted, and as a result, it really messed with Europe's climate to like devastating results. Like a lot of people died. It was like, yeah. So it was like it was more than just it being rainy. It was like,
oh man, they really gloss over that in these history things. But Jesus, talk about the butterfly effect. Volcano leading to
right. But yeah, it was summer without a sun. It was basically because like ashen, deposits, and it really just screwed up the whole climate, which messed with crops, which caused famine. So a very spooky, dark,
and also led to
phenomenon.
Spooky, cooped up in the house all day, rainy for these poets.
Being trapped in a villa full of poets.
Jesus, what a nightmare. Am I right? What a nightmare. Well, after a while, Lord Byron announces to the room one night, suggesting that while reading ghost stories, mind you, that they should all write ghost stories. That's what we were going to pass the time with.
That is the activity of the evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's entertainment is you will write a ghost story for me.
I am Lord Byron. But they were actually, they were like reading ghost stories. They were reading a book called Phantasmagoria. Which
German stories, right?
Yeah, spooky German ghost stories.
And so they were reading that. And so then they all separated to try to write these stories. Byron wrote a fragment. It was called a fragment, kind of a novel. There's a few different things, but it was the beginnings of a vampire's story. His friend John Polidori would later go on and expand that into a full story called The Vampire, which fun little saucy information. John Polidori, they were friends for a while. He was a physician, but he was also maybe a spy for John Murray, who was Lord Byron's publisher, because Lord Byron was such a bohemian that his publisher thought, I want you to record everything he does. So later on in life, we might have a good bestseller. And that's what he did.
He was like, so, I'm on it.
Layers on this weekend, I'm telling you.
For real.
Both Mary and Claire struggled to come up with stories. This is from the biography at the beginning of Frankenstein. It said, inspiration did not come easily to Mary. Quote, I thought and pondered vainly. I felt that blank incapability of invention, which is the greatest misery of authorship, when dull nothing replies to our anxious invocations. Whoa, damn. But yeah, it's called writer's block, and that's scary.
That's the author of Frankenstein right there.
That's right. Like I couldn't come up with anything. Sometimes, as Stephen King says in his memoir on writing, he says, quote, your job isn't to find ideas, but to recognize them when they show up. And that's what Mary did. She that's jumped in the future. That's some
art inspiration to live by right there.
Right? That's it. That's exactly what she did, because on this weekend, while they're writing their stories, Byron and Percy hit it off. They would talk days and days and days. Often excluding Mary. So Mary was just left to sit there and listen. And one of their many conversation topics was the kernel of life and how to catch it and how to create it. And so this is likely that and her observations of Galvanism, which was happening at the time, all led to the seeds of creating Frankenstein, which I'd say she won that contest that weekend, is what I'm saying.
And Galvanism is the use of electrical current to revive animals. And this was like a hot topic in the scientific world at the time.
And that's how Frankenstein gets his creature. And there's also stories that weekend she was haunted by this vision that she saw the character Victor Frankenstein from her novel hunched over his creation. That like she had this vision and saw it, and it haunted her for a while. There's a lot of people attribute Victor Frankenstein in the book to having a lot of similarities to Percy, that she drew, kind of based the character off of Percy, which is very interesting. And a father that ran away from his basically kid.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, and I feel like it depends on the source. A lot of people kind of gloss over this, in the literary world, but like, they were doing drugs. Like they were like
living it up.
They were living it up. They were radical poets. Like they were partying. They were definitely exploring, right? Like I don't bring that up as just like a funny little aside. I bring it up because I think it's important.
Drugs.
Yeah, drugs. Like, no, I think it's important. I think as even in just academic conversations, because it is a little taboo for some people, we don't always like to talk about the role of altered states in creativity. And it sometimes has a very prominent role. Nice. And it was definitely at play during this, dark and stormy night where Byron suggests a game.
It's too good to be true that Frankenstein, which really rocked modern horror, that like created this whole like, whoa, Jesus, was made a weekend of a dark and stormy night when some of the most prolific poets were stuck in a house together, and she's seeing visions and like while telling ghost stories to each other. It's like, fuck, dude. Like
it's pretty unbelievable. And you always have to take these things with a grain of salt. Like stories get retold, but there is nothing to suggest that it didn't happen this way. It is important to recognize too, though, that she kind of brings the beginnings of Frankenstein to the table as part of this ghost story contest that they're
doing. She didn't write it for a while.
The book isn't written for months after that,
right?
But the beginnings of the story came from this
Colonel
dark
that
and
weekend.
stormy night, which
Mhm.
like is also like a party that I would like to be at. Like, let's be honest. Like, if I could go back in time, like this is one of the places I'd like to hop into for a minute. Like,
Be a fly on the wall that weekend.
oh my God. So she ends up bringing this terrifying tale, but it's not only probably the scariest of the tales, it's also the most interesting, you know. She took the ghost story contest to a very different place, right?
Right.
Using these theories of science and scientific discovery. It just was something all its own. And that's why it is one of the most important texts in literary history, even now. Like, it was genre defining. It took several months before the book itself was actually published.
It's a great read if you haven't read it. It's a fantastic read. And it's also like completely original too. That's the thing that we gloss over, is that it came from the mind. She was 18 when she wrote this. Whereas I think somewhere Byron had remarked that it was read with like a voice of totally, it was fully English, that there wasn't like German expressionism that was coming into it. There wasn't any other influences, because it was coming from this quote unquote uneducated. She came up with this story. Not unlike anything anyone had seen, because it wasn't made by the tools everybody else was using, if that would make sense. It came out of left field, which is so it's wonderful in any art form. And you see something like, wow, that's completely unlike anything out there right now. And that's awesome. That's why I mean, like that.
That's what creativity is. It's making brand new connections. Like,
sure,
doing something like that is when you connect things that weren't previously connected. And this is just such a clear example of that. You know, you have gothic horror meets science fiction for the first time ever. And yeah, and she was 19 years old, a teenage girl. And Frankenstein is published in 1818.
Mm-hmm.
It was published anonymously because the patriarchy.
A lot of people assumed that Percy wrote it.
Yes.
Just because why wouldn't you? At that time.
Because obviously
the man wrote it, you know.
Yeah. And it's published to huge acclaim. It did very well, like right out the gate.
I wrote there's some really fun bad reviews of it when it came out too. There's obviously great acclaim when it came out, but I just always think it's funny reading bad reviews of what we recognize as like seminal works in fucking culture.
Yeah,
you know?
because that's literally how all of like art history works. It's like all the shit we talk about now was like mad hated on. Like
mad hated on.
Like it's such a constant pattern. Like at any point in history, you can look at a famous work of literature, work of art, or whatever, and someone was talking
mad
real shit about it. Yeah.
Like just like in this quarterly review of the book, where it said, quote, "It includes no lesson of conduct, manners, or morality. It fatigues the feelings without interesting the understanding. It gratuitously harasses the heart and only adds to the sore already too great of painful sensation. The reader is left after a struggle between laughter and loathing, in doubt whether the head or the heart of the author be the most diseased." First of all, whoa. Like,
critics, dude, of all kinds. Critics make me laugh so much. Like,
one must wonder.
They just get so worked up and like everything's so serious. And it's just like, man, chill out. Like,
Jesus, I know.
It's so funny to me. I mean, this goes back to the beginning of the episode, that like weird critic that was talking about Cecil Hotel, that I felt like his critique was just so angry and I felt like he just like missed the point. But I also was just like, man, chill out. You know? Like I feel like people who really their identity is wrapped up in being like a critic, like an art critic or a book critic or whatever, it always feels so serious. It always feels so dire. And it's like, it's life or death. And it's like, it really isn't, bro. Also, in like 100 years, people are probably going to be reading this and laughing. So
like I just did.
Exactly. Frankenstein, it's a great tale. I read it for the first time only a couple of years ago, and it's beautifully written. Like, she knew how to use words, man. It's really beautiful, the tale that she was able to weave. I know you mentioned at the beginning of this episode, like, some films that you watched. Did you watch Mary Shelley?
I did.
With Elle Fanning?
Yes. I thought I watched two, and that was probably the other one I watched was called A Nightmare Wakes. It was on Shudder, and you can avoid that one. One, because I thought, that one I think really digs into Mary's mindset, but it's told in a very bland, slow sort of like weekend. Like, it's tough to sit through, but I don't know, if you want to try it, go for it. But Mary Shelley, I thought, was much better produced. I thought it was fine. It was interesting doing all this research and then watching like this biopic right afterward, and me just being like, yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, I know.
Duh. It's just it's funny. It's not usually how I go into a biopic. I usually feel like I learn things, and this one I was like, I just read all this. But I don't know. I thought it was fine. I watched those two movies that were specifically about Mary Shelley, which I thought both Mary Shelley's I think did an adequate job of giving a lot of historical accuracies. And really painting this picture with Percy. I thought that was the biggest success of the movie.
Definitely. That's the focus for sure.
Yeah, it's the relationship.
Mm-hmm. I liked it. I thought it was well done. I like Elle Fanning. I thought she did a good job.
She's fine.
I thought there's a couple of scenes that I thought were just like really like beautiful, like really, really some really lovely dialogue for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good because that would be necessary for the story of Mary Shelley. I feel like if there's a story about Mary Shelley and it wasn't like romantic dialogue and like beautiful wording, that would not fit. But I thought some of the dialogue was really, really beautifully done.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. It's on Hulu right now if anyone wants to watch it. I watched that, and then I will always recommend the Drunk History episode. It's so good. Yeah. And it gets some things wrong because it's drunk history, but it's fantastic.
And I think one of Mary Shelley's best on-screen performances is in Bride of Frankenstein. Back here, there it is, where the movie starts with it's Byron and Percy and Shelley sitting in this big room, and she's like, that wasn't the full story, and then they go into
excuse me.
It's wonderful. And Byron and Percy are standing there, and they're like, "Will do tell," and then it goes into the movie. I just think it's so fun. We talk a little bit about the enduring legacy of Frankenstein, because she created this thing that most people know the name before they know her. You know, that's well done. And I'm sorry, we don't connect your name.
Yeah, no, I think most of my life I didn't realize. That's another one of those kind of failures of like our education system. Like, we get pretty much forced to read like white male author after white male author after white male author. And then there's this book that is one of like the most important literary achievements, and I don't remember anyone ever making it clear to me that it was a young girl that wrote it. Like, as a young girl, I don't remember anyone ever making that clear to me. And like, that's sad. like why is it that way? I don't understand.
Because there's more history written by men. I mean, that's how it was. You know, there's the less written. I'm not saying that's the way it is and forever will be. I'm saying that's how it has been. And so I feel like but
also in our culture, I think this one just really stings, because also in our culture, like Western culture, like we're pretty obsessed with authorship and have been for a very long time. And authorship is very important, and it's very important to like give credit to the creator of something. And we do that with all, sorts of authors, but like this example is kind of brushed aside, right? It's just like,
At least it was for us, in our
exactly.
school system, in our Midwest school system. Yeah.
And that was also in the 90s. Like that was a long time ago at this point, but I'm sure that people are doing better. I hope it's more widely known, but I honestly, for most of my life, I did not. I knew Frankenstein, very important book, very important story.
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that it was written by a 19-year-old girl.
Hell of a book, man. You know what I was writing at 19? Not this.
Your conspiracy theory paper for
I was. Sure did.
About the moon landing.
Sure did. I gave a presentation in high school about moon landings fake. You know what it was, though? To my credit, I just didn't have my homework done, and I found a conspiracy website, and so that's the presentation I gave for my 5-minute thing.
And you were like, "This is really going to get them. They're going to be
especially
wow."
When I got to the bit of like, how'd they even take the pictures? If he was the first one on the moon. Riddle me that, Batman. Just like fucking lowest hanging fruit. I'm gonna get this bee and get out.
If he was the first man on the moon.
So dumb.
Good.
We gotta look back and laugh,
Totally. I love that. That's a great story.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do, a future episode where we dive into the tale of Frankenstein, the monster of Frankenstein.
Well, he's right here. We'll just ask him.
Hey, buddy.
There he is. This is good old Frankie baby.
Oh, Frankie baby. That's cute. Hi, Frankie baby.
A friend sent me this thing the other day talking about, oh my God, I can't remember how it went, but it was basically like, it was Connor. I was talking to Connor the other day. We were talking about how just having some more understanding about Frankenstein's creature and less demonizing him. And what if everybody was just like, oh yeah, that's just Frankie's boy. He had a bad run. His father didn't really stick around, but he's got a heart of gold. That one, he's Frankie's boy.
Frankie's boy. Oh my God, that's so good. Because that's important too. It's in recent history become a meme how Frankenstein isn't the monster. Frankenstein is,
but also, which I think is a beautiful happenstance that we now connect the two of them, that they are inseparable.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's very interesting.
I think you're right saying it both ways, that he is Victor and Victor is him, that they are, you can't separate them. And that's totally the story,
But to give credit to your joke, like Frankie's boy, like that's hilarious.
It's funny. It's a good time.
Oh, he's no monster. That's just Frankie's boy.
That's just Frankie's boy. He had a rough life.
I love that. Should we maybe wrap things up with a listener mail?
Oh, please do. Are we talking about? Oh yeah. Kaya.
Yeah, sweet Kaya. This is cute and nice, and we're gonna read it. Hi, Corrie. Hi, Brian. My name is Kaya. I live in Arizona, and I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I have a bachelor's in liberal arts focused on sociology.
Hell yeah.
Girl, I did basically the same thing in undergrad. I had an art history minor in addition to that, but
I was a theater major. Put all my chips into that one thing. Worked out great.
No, I got a liberal arts degree. I focused on sociology and psychology, and I had minors in art history and dance. Boom. That's also why I was in undergrad for 6 years.
Took a few victory laps. It's all good.
I loved it. It was fun. I was having a good time. I have a bachelor's in liberal arts focused on sociology and a master's in English lit. Some of my favorite classes have discussed, race, gender, sexuality, class, disability, etc. But also I had great joy in taking a horror lit class.
Woo!
As well as a magic and witches in the Renaissance period class. Dope.
What?
where we discussed a lot of those founding witch tropes that, as I think I remember you discussing, in a lot of ways endure today. This was also during my I'm probably a witch phase.
Phase? This is a lifestyle, dude.
Truly. Own that shit. Which brings me to why I wanted to reach out to you guys. I was just listening to the Hansel and Gretel episode, and you guys talked about witches a little bit, which you often do because they intersect with a lot of other stuff. And the whole discussion reminded me of a short story by Lee Bardugo, author of the Shadow and Bone Ya trilogy, which I recommend to everyone, called The Witch of Duva. This might be my all-time favorite witch story. So much subversion of the usual witches and stepmothers our evil story. Plus, some of the details were just personally significant to me in really deep and lasting ways. There's so much about this story that vibes with your discussion. It's a folklore set in the universe of her trilogy, though you absolutely don't need to read them to understand the story. And to my mind, it's clearly drawing on Hansel and Gretel. It centers on a family that is especially hard hit by general rough times. Food is hard to come by, and the children are said to be disappearing. People whisper that it's the witch who lives alone in the woods. A young girl is forced to leave her home. I don't want to spoil anything. The ending for me is fantastic. In fact, I think I'm going to go reread it. Thanks for reading my rambles. Your fan, Kaya. P.S. I would love to listen to you guys talk about witches for a whole hour. I think that would make my week. Although I'll be honest and say I haven't listened to every episode yet, so it's possible that you already have. If so, I look forward to it.
Thank you.
We haven't done a witches episode yet
because it's a big topic. I'm like, yes.
I think we could do a series. I think we could do several episodes.
Yeah.
On witches. We did an Art History Babes episode on witches, which is like 2 hours long, and like I feel like we barely even did it. Like I feel like we barely even talked about what we could have talked about, and that's just about like witches in art history. So so the topic of witches is huge. We will definitely do witch content, but yes, I agree. I think we should maybe break it down into some more specific witches
in horror history, favorite on-screen witches.
Yes, some different specific approaches to witches, because there's just so much there that's also good. But thank you so much for writing in. That was such a fun, nice email. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah.
Happy to hear that you're enjoying the show.
And if you want to be just like Kaya, which you should, she sounds dope, you can email us at happyharvesthorrorshow@gmail.com for any other suggestions on episodes we could do, because we'd love hearing that, where we could take the show. And any just suggestions on what you're digging, because that's awesome. There's a lot of spooky content out there. I love hearing more. I had never heard about this story, and I'm excited to go check it out.
Yeah, I love connections. I love connections to, anything we say, like whatever it makes you think of. I want to hear it.
I want it.
I want to hear it. But yeah, that was our episode on
Mary Shelley.
Mary Shelley, the goth teen queen dream. A personal hero of mine at this point, honestly.
Dude.
Just a pretty incredible woman who, if nothing else, had a fascinating life, for sure.
All before 24, and then she lived a full life after that too.
Yeah. Then she lived to. Did we even say when she died?
Yeah, she died in 1851, right?
Yes, 1851 at the age of 53. So just due diligence there. But thank you for listening to our Mary Shelley episode, and we'll catch you all next week. Hopefully you enjoyed this fun YouTube experiment. I hope it turned out all right.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
And keep it spooky, y'all.
Stay spooky. We'll see you next time.
That's something for the future. Like
Happy
Happy Harvest Horror Show live from the moon.
Live from the moon. Spookiest place of all.
Truly though. God.
Where no one hears you scream.
Yeah, I think about how spooky space travel is a lot. Would you ever travel into space?
Absolutely. I think that'd be like end of my life.
Yeah.
Shoot me to the stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I don't make it, I had a life, you know?
Yeah.
But
No. Yeah. Part of me would really like to do it, but like it's always kind of a big risk. So maybe like later years.
later years. Yeah. Because if my body was ever going to take the force of exiting the atmosphere, it's going to be when I'm 60, 70, 80.